Joining us right now is former military assistant to Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and Heritage founder, senior fellow Steve Bucci. Steve, thanks very much for joining us. Good to have you on the program. Let me get your take here on what we may learn or what investigators are looking for in terms of tying this and finding out what the next plan was. I mean, given the number of bombs, what, a dozen pipe bombs found, clearly it feels like they were planning something else, perhaps something a lot bigger.
Well, I think that's pretty clear. They made an attempt to escape. They didn't have all of these bombs with them. They didn't make them just to leave them in the house when they went off to die. So this is clearly, there was a secondary target or a follow-on target. We just don't know as yet what it might be.
So what's your takeaway at this point in the story?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that there was a terrorism nexus here. Whether the party argument caused this specific incident to occur, maybe changed the target, maybe moved up the timeline, but you don't build pipe bombs at that number quickly. You don't even load magazines that quickly. And by the way, tell your reporter, those weren't .22 caliber assault rifles. They're .223 assault rifles, like an M16. There's a big difference.
Tell us the difference. .223 assault rifles. Why do you make that distinction?
A .22 caliber in the minds of most Americans is a very small bullet.
That's a small gun, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a gun for shooting cans. A .556 is the millimeters, .223 in inches. That's an M16. That's a military-style rifle that you can use for hunting. You can use for target practice, but it's very effective against humans.
Wow. Dagen.
Steve, not to get into a gun control debate, but the guns were purchased legally, the rifles purchased by another individual under investigation, but the number of rounds that this couple had stockpiled and the bomb making, the IED making activity that was going on, people just want to know, how do you prevent this from happening again? How do you track down these people and what they're doing if they're not on any obvious watch list?
It's very, very difficult. Pipe bombs can be made with very normal materials you can get from a hardware store. If you don't buy them in mass quantities, it doesn't set off any flags. The same with the ammunition. If you buy it in smaller quantities, it doesn't set off any flags, and you can build it up over time, which, as I understand, that's exactly what these folks did.
Isn't it fascinating that he conducted a sort of a radicalization, and people are learning more about this through his social media accounts after returning from Saudi Arabia with then his wife. He started to grow a beard, he stopped his previous activities, and really just he's being described as having that personality change, Steve.
And that's what people need to be aware of. It's not always going to pop up in social media. A guy's not suddenly going to start doing rants on Twitter in favor of radical Islam. But when things start to change in the workplace, when a coworker starts to act very differently than they may have before, somebody needs to say something to a supervisor, and it needs to be looked into.
Kevin Kelly?
Hey, Steve, this is Kevin. Obviously, the big question is going to come out about gun control, and that's going to be at the forefront again. So what are we going to see on that front? Are we going to see municipalities and states starting to implement some gun control measures, or is the federal government going to come in? Where is the shakeout going to be on the gun control front, especially heading into this election year?
Well, I think you've already seen the president and some of the candidates reflexively, before we knew anything about the situation, say, oh, my God, this is a case clearly for gun control. You know, if they didn't use the guns, they probably could have used the bombs. So, I mean, gun control is not the panacea here, but, you know, there's mental health checks, there's the workplace checks when behavior changes. We need to look at all those things, not just jump and say, if we eliminate the guns, all this will go away. That's just not true.
Yeah. We should point out that California has some of the strictest gun control regulations in the state.
Right.
Period.
Well, I mean, President Obama, you know, immediately went to the gun control agenda. We still have not heard him address this as terrorism. I think yesterday he said there could be a tie to terrorism. Steve, when would you expect that acknowledgement?
Gosh, I hope it's soon. Yeah. I mean, it's Ray Charles could see that this is terrorism. We really need to stop kidding ourselves and do it. I understand the FBI, they have legal restrictions that will affect their, case, but in this case, these guys are dead.
Right.
Let's call it what it is. Try and find anybody else involved and deal with it.
Right,
Agreed.
course,
Even
yeah.
Timothy McVeigh was characterized as a terrorist, right?
Huh.
So why can't we label
Right.
these people as terrorists?
It's horrible. It doesn't fit into the narrative, I guess, that
doesn't.
the president has been selling. Steve, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. Steve Bucci. Want to move